Hello and welcome to another movie review. As always, I'm Kelly, and I just got out of The Empty Man. And yes, I know it's been a while. School and COVID, you know how it is. Well, there is that, and the fact that barely anything is even coming out right now, except for, C-list trash that no studio cares about. Hey, look! Our movie today. Okay, to be fair, this is not C-list trash. There's a reason I have Ready or Not up there, because this film actually is on the better side of things, but you can definitely tell it's one of the ones that Disney threw out into theaters without giving a shit whether or not it was actually done yet. And don't get me wrong, I do think they finished this movie, but I do feel that if this was still Fox, they would have given it a little bit more time to rework, tweak, maybe even reshoot a couple of things. Because you can definitely tell that this is one of those movies that it doesn't feel quite finished yet. There's just a bad effect here. There's a bad line delivery here. It's just one of those ones that a little bit more time and polish would have really helped out. But does that make this movie bad? I'd actually argue no. Though I am clearly in the minority if you were to go off of the Rotten Tomatoes score. I think it's sitting at like 17% right now. Jesus! Of course, only 6 critics have actually reviewed this thing, so I don't know how much I trust that rating. Mostly because I saw the movie, and this is honestly a masterclass in just setting up atmosphere. It's dark, it's depressing, it makes you feel kind of empty inside, hence the name The Empty Man. And while it does start off as something, say, like Candyman on the better side or on the worse side, The Bye-Bye Man, it quickly evolves into something more akin to like Seven or just like a psychological mystery thriller. And you can tell that this movie is definitely going much more for the slow burn than the instant glorification of scares. I was genuinely shocked when they had perfect opportunities to put even good jump scares inside of their movie, but they didn't. Instead, they let the atmosphere kind of speak for itself. One of the more unnerving moments in this movie is when a character's just walking down a bridge and suddenly the sound just dies. It happens both in the universe of the film and in the audience, where no bugs, no rustling of leaves, no wind, no random cars in the background, just everything goes silent. And I felt more from that one moment than I have in so many other horror films. And because of a lot of really good moments like that inside of this, I was genuinely on board, really, really getting into what's going on here. And then the ending happened, and pretty much all the goodwill that was building up inside of me started to just fade away, because, man, that ending kind of just killed it. It's one of those movies. And with that said, it's pretty obvious that I can't talk anymore about this film without going into the actual spoilers. So if you don't want to get spoiled to anything, here's the time code to jump to. Starting with the things that this movie does good, again, the masterclass of the atmosphere is what sells this movie. And it is very, very unnerving. This is very uncomfortable, and it's obviously very intentional. This isn't a gore porn that's like just trying to shoot blood at you and trying to freak you out like that. Nor is this a jump scare fest where every 5 seconds there's a loud noise banging you around. This is more of the horror of isolation, of just not feeling right. Just the paranoia that you tend to feel. And kind of can be summed up with the feeling of what most people felt when they got put into lockdown earlier this year. It's that feeling of lack of socialness that's pushing you more and more to the edge until you finally snap. Nobody is in a good state of mind in this movie. They're dealing with depression, they're dealing with guilt, they're dealing with legitimate loss. It's just nobody is in their right mind right now. And that translates in a lot of ways similar to John Carpenter's The Thing, where it's just you don't know who to believe, you don't know who to trust, and you don't know what necessarily is going on. And the lead, played by James Dale, while he's not the best written character, he's intentionally written to be kind of a blank slate, a void, if you will, and I'll get into that in the next section a little bit. He does still have some pretty good moments, especially when he's being chased by a bunch of cultists that were praying around a fire in the middle of the night in the middle of some woods that he's investigating at the moment. When all these cultists just kind of stop turn and look right at him in the dark, completely faceless and voided out, and he's just slowly taking a step back. They slowly take a step forward. He takes a step back. They take a step forward. And his instant reaction is, fuck this, and just bolts it. It's moments like that where you can tell there is still humanity inside of this movie, despite its more avant-garde nature to it, which we're probably going to have to get into in the next section. I know I'm kind of setting this up a little bit, but trust me, it'll make sense when I explain. But before I do, I should probably talk about the other side of this, the cult, which I feel is a very, very good aspect to this movie. It really does start off as just kind of a horror, legend, entity, curse thing, you know, like the Bye-Bye Man, or on the better side of things, Candyman. You know, you call this entity to you by doing this preset things like saying his name in the mirror, or, you know, thinking about him, or all this other stuff. In this case, the Quiet Man is brought upon by going to a bridge at night, blowing into the bottle while thinking of this guy and saying his name. It'll call him to you. You know, they set up this legend of the first day you hear him, the second day you see him, and the third day he sees you. And while that sounds super cliche, it's supposed to be, because it's actually made up by a bunch of cultists, most of which who appear to be running things are teenagers. And yeah, they're making this shit up so they can trick people into getting on the right wavelength to an eldritch god that's pretty much here to bring about the end of humanity. When I said that this was kind of an avant-garde approach to horror, it really takes a cliche setup and twists it into something else. And the attempt, if nothing else, is ambitious, and I appreciate it for it. Even if you think it did not work here, this is more balls than most horror films have had in years. The only thing I can compare it to is basically Cabin in the Woods and its way of twisting cliches on top of themselves. Because that's essentially what's happening here. And this cult that's doing everything are genuinely creepy, off-putting, but they're not that far out of the realism spectrum, you know? Yes, they're using magic, psychic powers that apparently everyone has because reality is not real. Yes, they're calling on Cthulhu, elder-like gods, and things of this sort. But really, when you get down to the way they're actually operating, they're not doing anything that you wouldn't see a political party do. The main character even at first acknowledges that this is basically just the setup for some new age hippie religion of peace and love, man, you know, the world's not real, we're all gonna die. He compares it to a self-help seminar of just new age bullshit, just taken to a logical extreme, which essentially is what it is. And pretty much every actor and actress associated with this group bring a different level of crazy to it that's not outside the realm of plausibility, so it's not like they're going over the top, but it's still engaging and entertaining. Again, even if you would to see this and say it didn't work at all, I'd say appreciate the fact that it tried, because again, this is a lot more than most films try to give us these days. But we can't really dance around it anymore, and we actually have to talk about the full-on bad in this movie. And the bad is that this movie is a slow burn. This film is 2 hours and 17 minutes long, and it feels longer. This is The Witch all over again. And looking through those reviews, a lot of the complaints come from the fact that this is a slow burn. And if you are not on board in the first 30 minutes, you are not going to like this. Admittedly, that first 30 minutes did something that a lot of other horror films avoid, pretty much because of how jarring it is. The first 30 minutes isn't just an introduction, it's a whole fucking movie. It's a short horror story. Now, in an isolated box, this opening montage with 4 hikers climbing a mountain where one falls into a secret cave and apparently gets infected by the Empty Man, and shit happens. You know, this is just your typical standard setup of, well, we need an inciting incident so that people understand what's actually happening right now. You know, we gotta see the monster kill somebody first, regardless of whether it ties in at the end. And again, in isolation, this 30 minutes works pretty damn well and effectively as a short of pretty much 4 people in a cabin losing their minds. But in the context of the rest of the film, after this first 30 minutes, we cut to some place in Missouri, and this entire incident isn't even mentioned again until it turns out that one of the people that we've been following, who's in a coma in a fucking hospital bed, is actually the only survivor of this thing. It's a tenuous connection at best, and again, I use the word avant-garde here because you don't see this in regular horror films for a reason. And because of that off-putting pacing, I can very easily see people falling off this movie. So you don't really get to appreciate some of the more atmospheric things it does, because this slow sequence of a guy walking on a bridge, for example, to go back to that scene, comes very, very annoying when you had to sit through a bunch of other people who don't seem to matter in the story walking on the same bridge, super lonely and annoying. Slow burns are a double-edged sword. I personally prefer them because it takes its time to set things up so that we actually feel something by the end. However, if you do it wrong, and there are several points in this movie where I would say they probably would fall into the category of wrong, you very easily alienate everyone in the room because they just want this to be over. And then you put the cherry on top of it with the ending, where it turns out everything we saw was pretty much meaningless because it didn't actually happen the way we saw it. Maybe. I say maybe because it's left up to interpretation. It's a very avant-garde way of putting it. However, if we were to believe what this girl says at the end, just before the main lead starts getting truly infected and becoming the prophet of the empty man because he needs a vessel, and the only person that was a vessel was aka the one guy in the coma who's already on death's door, so they need someone new. According to this girl, the main lead was created to be this god's new vessel, the prophet of their doomsday cult, and he's only been alive for 3 days. So pretty much everything that we've seen in the course of his investigation and him being haunted by the empty man and all this other stuff only happened in 3 days. His whole backstory's a lie. I call bullshit on that for a couple of reasons. However, I'm mostly on board with this idea. Even the way they show the final confrontation between the lead and the empty man, this whole mindscape, him reliving some of the things that happened earlier in the movie with little details that suddenly make sense now. Him fighting this creature in this hallway, trying to gun it down, but it's not working. The thing, like, burrowing into his body like a fucking face hugger. And him having to relive his tragic past, which he's been kind of avoiding even talking about throughout this whole movie. Again, I'm on board with almost all of this right up until they hit the one horror cliche I really wish they hadn't. The monster wins. It infected him, and now he's killed the prophet, and he became the prophet, and the world will end and finally reach unity with the true connection, and blah, 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 blah. Are we really going down this route? For people who have watched my channel for a while, you know the one horror cliche I wish would fucking die, the one that pisses me off to no end, is the idea that the monster has to win at the end, especially when it's not deserved, because the empty man has had pretty much no fucking presence in this entire movie. It's always been the doomsday cult. If anything, the cult should have the victory, not their god. This whole movie is basically a message about overcoming tragedy, loss, depression, and all the vices and things that humanity does to distract themselves from that. It's what literally lets the empty man get inside of you so that your stupid story about calling him on a bridge by blowing into a fucking bottle becomes real. It's the power of thought, mind over matter. So this movie should have ended with him having his final confrontation with the empty man and coming out a real boy at the end. Tragedy is what makes us human. It's overcoming that tragedy and becoming better people because of it. You had a perfect opportunity to have a genuinely great horror film and a genuinely great ending to match it. But you went with the horror cliche where the monster had to win, and the movie literally just abruptly cuts as soon as the cultists start bowing to you. Oh joy. I love this when I saw it in all of the Paranormal Activity movies. I loved it every single time I watch a fucking Conjuring movie. Oh wait, those ones don't do this. And because the whole movie pretty much gets rendered meaningless by him accepting that he's not a real boy and that he was always a puppet to the cause and blah, 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 all that stuff, I went through 2 hours and 17 minutes of what for this? The ending is paramount, and you need to stick this landing, and this landing did not stick. Again, if this had been cared about by a studio, they probably would have had a reshoot or an alternate ending, and maybe have just focus tested a little bit, and probably could have come up with something great here. Instead, you ended up with something garbage. And yeah, we all had to suffer for it. I truly feel empty inside after watching this. But with that said, does this make it a bad movie? I would say no. There's a lot of really good aspects to this. The actors are giving 110%, even if it doesn't always seem like that because the script is telling them not to. It takes fucking chances. The ambition alone in this movie is more than you will ever see from a mainstream Hollywood film or even a fucking Blumhouse production. So that alone should be praised. Could this have done better? Yes. Should it have done better? Yes. Should have been thrown into theaters at a time when no one can fucking see it because the studio didn't want to, do anything with it? No. And fuck them for doing that. But all in all, my personal rating almost gave it a must-see. Almost. If not for the ending, and if not for the fact that it was such a slow burn, I would have given it that. So personally for me, I'll give it a see it. You will not regret the money that you spent on this movie. It is an enjoyable watch, especially if you like a slow burn like I do. Is it worth seeing in theaters with COVID and things? Well, that's a two-edged sword. Honestly, if I were to say, packed theater standards, no, absolutely not. Completely not. But I saw it opening day inside of my town, and there was only 2 other people in the theater, and we sat on other ends of the entire theater. So I don't think COVID's much of a worry right now, in theaters anyway, in Utah at the very least. So all in all, my final rating, see it. And that's it for me. Have you enjoyed the video? Did you see The Empty Man? Tell me what you thought about it in the comments down below. Let's get some healthy discussion going. And as always, if you want us to help support this channel or if you want to see more, be sure to hit the like button, share, subscribe, all that jazz. All those things help my channel grow into something bigger and better and hopefully won't be devoid of any substance like The Empty Man. Also, I've been streaming a lot on this channel, a lot more than I have been doing reviews actually. So every Thursday night on this channel I do stream video games. Just got done with a live stream of Doom for 2020. If you want to go back and watch the playlist, I'll put a link inside of the iCard up there in the corner or whatever it is. And yeah, that's it for me. So I guess I'll see you guys next time.